After the mourning period, Sharon became determined to have another son to heal her husband's broken heart. Over the next few years, she gave birth to 2 more daughters, twin girls. But her hope for a son remained unfulfilled. The last pregnancy ended in complications. The delivery was difficult, and the doctors warned her that she could never have another child. The news broke Sharon. Her husband, who had been patient, began to grow restless. As the only son of his father, the pressure on him to produce a male heir mounted. One day, Josh and his father had a discussion about a plan for him to father a son with another woman, even if he didn't marry her. "I can't let our lineage end here," his father said firmly. "Find someone who will give you a son. It's the only way." One evening, Josh sat her down. His voice was calm but firm. "Sharon, we really need a son." Sharon's heart sank. "Josh, we've tried. Maybe we should accept what we have." Josh shook his head. "You don't understand. As my father's only son, it's my duty to have a male child. If you can't give me one, we have to find someone who can, maybe a surrogate." "What do you mean by that?" Sharon asked, her voice trembling. Josh hesitated before saying, "My father suggested I find another woman to have a son. I don't want to, but I might not have a choice." Sharon's tears fell uncontrollably. "Josh, I can't lose you. Please don't do this." Josh softened but said, "Then let's get someone to give us a son, Sharon. That's all I'm asking." Sharon couldn't sleep that night. Her mind kept returning to the secret she had buried for years. Her son was alive, but he was being raised by Sandra. She knew what she had to do, even if it would change everything. One night, Sharon and Josh had another painful argument. His harsh words and cold treatment broke her spirit, but deep down she knew the truth. He has a son, Obiajalu. The next day, with a heavy heart, she visited Sandra. Sitting in the living room, Sharon hesitated before speaking. "Sandra, I need to talk to you. It's important." Sandra noticed Sharon's troubled expression. "What's wrong, Sharon?" Sharon took a deep breath. "I need him back. My son. I need him." Sandra froze. "What are you talking about?" Sharon wiped her tears. "Josh needs a son. If I don't give him one, I'll lose my family. Please, Sandra, give him back." Sandra's eyes widened in shock. "You can't be serious, Sharon. Obiajalu is my son now. I've raised him, loved him. My husband loves him, and we've raised him as our own. You can't just take him away after all these years." But Sharon was determined. "I am his biological mother, Sandra. I carried him in my womb and I gave birth to him. I've kept this secret for long enough. I need him back. My husband will never stop tormenting me unless I show him that I can give him a son. Please, Sandra, you have to understand." Sandra stood up, her voice firm. "We had an agreement. You signed the papers. He's legally my child and I won't let you take him away." The twins argued for days, with neither willing to back down. The tension between them grew, and soon Sandra's husband, Daniel, noticed something was wrong. When he confronted Sandra, the truth came tumbling out. Daniel was devastated. He felt betrayed by the woman he loved more than anything. His world came crashing down. Daniel screamed, his voice trembling with anger. "You are evil and despicable, Sandra. Tell me, for how long were you planning to deceive me and keep up with your lies? How could you? I can't believe I've spent years living with someone like you. If you can do this, who knows what worse things you're capable of. I'm disappointed, Sandra. You're wicked, so wicked. What happened to honesty? What happened to coming clean with the truth? I regret ever loving you. I regret every single moment I've spent loving you all these years. You don't deserve a man like me. Sandra fell to her knees, her sobs echoing through the room as her world began to crumble. She tried to speak, but the lump in her throat wouldn't let her. Before she could say a word, Daniel's mother, who was spending the week at their house, rushed out of her room, alarmed by the commotion. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her eyes darting between her son and Sandra. Daniel, struggling to control his anger, turned away, muttering, "It's nothing, Mum. We're just having a little misunderstanding." His mother wasn't convinced. She took one look at Sandra, who was trembling and drenched in tears, and shook her head. "This is not just a misunderstanding. Someone tell me the truth. What is going on here?" Sandra, her voice breaking, managed to say, "Mom, you pushed me into this. You pressured me because of my childlessness. I couldn't take it anymore. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and now my home is about to be destroyed. Everything I hold dear is slipping through my fingers. Did you just call this a mistake?" Daniel roared, his face contorted in pain. "This was not a mistake, Sandra. This was a deliberate, calculated act. A mistake is accidental. What you did was intentional." Daniel's mother, now visibly shaken, raised her hands in frustration. "Stop talking in circles and tell me what's going on. Can someone explain this madness to me?" Daniel, his voice now laced with exhaustion, turned to his mother. "Obiajalu is not our biological son, Mum," he said bitterly. "He is Sharon and Josh's son. I've been living a lie all these years. I hope you're happy now, Mum. I begged you to stop tormenting Sandra, but you wouldn't listen. You kept pressuring her to give you a grandchild. Well, congratulations, your pressure has destroyed my home." Daniel's mother staggered backward, her face pale with disbelief. She turned to Sandra, tears welling in her eyes. "Tell me this is a joke, Sandra. Tell me it's not true." Sandra sobbed harder, barely able to lift her head. "Mum, I only did what I thought any mother would do under pressure. You don't understand what it felt like to be barren, to be judged. I just wanted to make everyone happy. No, not every mother would do this." Daniel interjected, his voice sharp with bitterness. Daniel's mother's hands trembled as she pressed them to her chest. "The shame. The disgrace," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Then suddenly she shouted, "Sandra, you have killed me. What will I tell people? How can I face the world?" Overwhelmed, she clutched her chest and collapsed onto the floor. Daniel cried, rushing to her side. Sandra screamed and ran out to get help. She was rushed to the hospital, her lifeless body carried with urgency. Hours later, the doctor came out and assured them that she would recover. But her words from earlier continued to haunt Daniel and Sandra. The weight of their choices hung heavily over them, suffocating them in a silence that no words could break. Josh, on the other hand, had mixed feelings. He was very angry at his wife for her actions, but he was still grateful and relieved he had a son. The case ended up in court. Both families were now faced with an impossible choice. Who would win custody of the boy Sharon had given up to save Sandra's marriage? Sandra had raised him for years, but Sharon was his biological mother. Their bond as twins was now at breaking point, knowing the battle was just beginning. The court case was the talk of the town. Friends, family, and neighbors were shocked to learn the truth about Sandra and Sharon's secret. The courtroom was packed as both sisters stood on opposite sides, their lawyers arguing fiercely. Sharon's lawyer presented her case. "My client, Sharon, is the biological mother of the child in question. She only gave him up out of love for her sister, but circumstances have changed. As his biological mother, she has the right to raise him." Sandra's lawyer countered, "Sandra is the legal mother. She has cared for the child since birth, and the boy only knows her as his mother. Removing him from her care would be traumatic and against his best interests." During the trial, emotions ran high. Sharon testified, tears streaming down her face. "I gave him up because I loved my sister and wanted to help her. But now my family is falling apart. I need my son back." Sandra responded tearfully, her voice breaking. "I've raised him for 10 years. He calls me mother. How can I give him up now? He's my world." The judge listened carefully to both sides. After weeks of deliberation, the verdict was announced. He ruled that the child's best interest was paramount. Since Sandra had raised the boy from birth, he had formed a bond with her and her husband. The child saw Sandra and Daniel as his parents, and tearing him away from the only home he had ever known would be cruel. The court decided that Sandra and Daniel would retain custody of Obiajalu, but Sharon and Josh were granted visitation rights. The judge emphasized that both women were mothers in different ways, and the child deserved to know the truth about his birth when he was old enough to understand. Sharon broke down in the courtroom, sobbing uncontrollably. Josh, who had been supportive, looked angry and disappointed. As they left the courthouse, Josh whispered to Sharon, "You gave away my son without telling me. I'll never forgive you for this." Sandra, though she had won, she felt no joy. The battle had destroyed the bond she shared with her twin sister, Sharon, and the secret they had kept for so long was now a wound that could never heal. Back home, Daniel confronted Sandra. "I loved you, trusted you. And now, I don't even know who you are." Sandra tried to explain. "I did it because I was afraid of losing you." Daniel shook his head. "I need time to think. I love our son, but I don't know how to feel about us." Both families were left shattered by the choices they had made. Sharon and Sandra's bond as sisters was broken, and their marriages were strained. Though the boy remained with Sandra, the cost of their secret was a pain they would carry forever. After the court ruling, Sandra's home was no longer the safe, happy place it had once been. Daniel, her husband who had always been her rock, was now a shadow of himself. The trust he had in Sandra was gone. Though he stayed in the house, his love for her felt like it had disappeared. Sandra tried her best to fix things. She cooked his favorite meals, apologized countless times, and begged for his forgiveness. But Daniel's heart was cold. He would leave the house early and come back late, reeking of alcohol. One night, Sandra decided to wait for him, even though it was well past midnight. When he stumbled into the house, she stood in the living room, arms crossed. "Daniel, we really need to talk," she said softly. He glanced at her, his eyes bloodshot. "What's there to talk about, Sandra? You lied to me. You betrayed me." "I know I did, and I'm sorry," Sandra said, tears in her eyes. "But we've been through so much together. I love you, Daniel." I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Fix what? You broke us. You hid something this big from me. You lied to me about a child that isn't mine, Sandra. How can I trust you again?" Sandra's heart sank. She had no answer. The lies she had built her life on had unraveled. Daniel shook his head and walked past her to their bedroom. He couldn't forgive her for hiding the truth about the child's real father. Sandra curled up on the couch, sobbing silently. She prayed for a miracle, for some way to heal the wounds her deceit had caused. Each day the tension grew. Sandra tried everything, cooking his favorite meals, apologizing over and over. But Daniel had shut her out. At night he would leave, returning late, smelling of alcohol. When Sandra tried to talk to him, he brushed her off. One night, after returning heavily drunk, he stumbled into their room. Sandra was awake waiting for him. "I know I made a mistake, Daniel. But I'll keep fighting for us, even if you don't," he said. Something in her voice touched him, breaking through his anger for just a moment. In his drunken state, his vulnerability showed. He reached out and touched her face. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," he whispered. Their closeness led to an intimate moment that left them both confused. The next morning, Sandra woke up feeling empty. Daniel avoided her gaze as he dressed. "I'm filing for divorce," he said flatly before leaving the room. Sandra's heart shattered all over again. She cried for hours, not knowing how to stop her life from falling apart. She loved him deeply and couldn't imagine life without him. But just as the divorce proceedings began, Sandra started feeling unwell. At first she thought it was the stress, but when the symptoms persisted, she visited the doctor and discovered she was pregnant. The news shocked them both. Daniel, though initially wary, began to soften as hope replaced his bitterness. Sandra's pregnancy brought a sense of renewal. To rebuild trust, Sandra and Daniel called for a meeting with Sharon and Josh. Despite their differences, they knew it was time to resolve the issue of their son. After heartfelt discussions, they all agreed on a solution. Obiagulu's name would be changed back to his biological father's name. Since Obiagulu was still too young to understand, he remained in Sandra's custody, but he started spending more time with his biological parents. This allowed him to form a bond with them and his sisters while still being loved and cared for by Sandra. They all agreed that when the time was right, Obiagulu would learn the truth about his parentage. Though the secret had caused immense pain, Sandra and Sharon found peace. The bond between them, though tested, was stronger than ever, and they learned that love and family were more than just blood. And as the months passed, Sandra's pregnancy progressed smoothly. Despite the doctor's earlier warnings of her slim chance of conceiving, she carried the baby to full term. Her husband, though hesitant at first, began to let go of his anger. Slowly but surely, they rebuilt their relationship, finding joy in the small moments of preparation for the arrival of their child. When Sandra's pregnancy reached full term, she gave birth to healthy twins, a boy and a girl. Tears of joy filled the room as her husband held their newborns in his arms. It felt like a miracle, a sign of new beginnings for their family. The arrival of the twins brought healing to their home. Daniel found it in his heart to forgive Sandra completely, and together, they vowed to never let lies come between them again. Though their journey was filled with pain and mistakes, Sandra and Daniel learned the importance of forgiveness and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. As years went by, Obiagelu, who had once been the center of conflict, now grew up surrounded by love from both families, and when he came of age, the truth was revealed to him. Far from being resentful, he embraced the love of both families. He formed a strong bond with his siblings and became a source of pride for both his mothers. He often said he was lucky to have two mothers who loved him dearly and always had his best interests at heart. Their once broken family grew stronger, proving that with time and effort, love and forgiveness can mend even the deepest wounds. This story teaches us the importance of honesty and trust in relationships. Love, honesty, and trust are the foundation upon which strong and lasting relationships are built. Deception, no matter how well-intentioned it might seem at the moment, can only provide a temporary solution to problems and often leads to even greater pain. It has the power to shatter the strongest bonds, leaving behind hurt and mistrust that may take years to mend. It also reminds us that patience, forgiveness, and love, when shared selflessly and consistently, have the ability to heal even the deepest wounds and rebuild the most broken relationships. It is through love and forgiveness that fractured families can find strength and unity once again, proving that no matter how far things fall apart, they can be restored with time, effort, and genuine care for one another. Thank you for watching this amazing video. I hope you enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed creating it. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment on the lessons you have learned, and let me know where you are watching from. See you in my next video. Bye.